It's been an eventful couple of weeks in the Middle East and a lot of eyes now on what happens next in Iran. Great piece up at Substack of our next guest, author, journalist, columnist Terry Glavin. You can find him, The Real Story, realstory.substack.com. His latest on the Peacemongers who gave us war. Terry Glavin, so great to have you with us here. Welcome to the program.
Oh, it's good to see you again, Rob.
Yeah, likewise, Terry. A lot to get into here. Let me ask you first of all, the Globe and Mail, I think, had the story this week. Border officials are on the lookout or concerned that Iranian officials who are attempting to flee may be coming here, may already be here. What should we make of that, first of all?
Well, we don't really have an immigration system to speak of that functions effectively in Canada anymore. I've been writing about these regime guys, senior IRGC guys who show up in Canada for quite a while, and there are already a lot here. And
Yeah.
I think there was some credence to the argument that by simply saying anybody from the IRGC should not be allowed into Canada, period, was rash because Iran's got a system of conscription. And if you get assigned to the IRGC, you're in the IRGC.
Right.
And so, we need to look at these things on a case-by-case basis. But we really don't have the intelligence or the resources. How many? I think there's 150. Is it? Am I right? 150,000 um, applications from within Canada for refugee status right now. From within Canada,
Right.
something like that. It's crazy. And it takes, I think, 42 weeks for each to be, on average, to be dealt with. So, yeah, we should be out. We should have our eyes on all that. I mean, there are a lot of, there's an argument from an Iranian point of view. Let them go to Canada. Screw these guys. Who cares? Canada doesn't
Yeah.
seem to care. Get them gone. So who
Then there are
knows?
those, there are those who want to flee for the right reasons, who are attempting to get out
Exactly.
from under this regime. Yeah.
Exactly. So you really got to be careful about all that. The other, where does it go next? I think is the big question. And there's a tremendous amount of anxiety in the diaspora communities from the people I talk to in the democratic opposition and within Iran itself, because over the past 15 years. In the liberal democracies, everybody's been so preoccupied with running away from anything that looks like regime change
Yeah.
that there has been no sort of institutional preparation for the possibility of regime change in Iran. All these years when we should have been helping the democratic opposition get its act together and perhaps forming a kind of an organic government in exile for the big day. We've just basically been in the American case, which people forget. We've gone from a policy, the Obama-Biden policy, which actually depended on the persistence of the regime, didn't want regime change, to the Trumpist policy, which is, we don't really give a damn. Whatever happens, we'll sort of deal with it on a day-by-day basis. So that you've got, I think everybody in Iran is just shell-shocked. A great, hundreds of thousands of Iranians left after the crushing of the Green Revolution in, I guess, 2009.
Right.
So yeah, the big question is, what's next? And I think you've got two or three major camps. The first is the people around, say, Masih Alinejad, and in Canada, Kaveh Shahruz, kind of a human rights activist, democratic grouping there. And that is, I think, the largest bloc, but it's the least organized. And then you've got the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, the National Council for the Resistance in Iran,
Yeah.
which is a very peculiar entity and network. Probably the most disciplined and best resourced of the Iranian opposition groups, but they're not very popular in Iran, and they're a bit dodgy. And then you've got the royalists. You've got people around Reza Shah Pahlavi, and he's not a popular figure outside a very, very, very determined and growing circle of sort of influence makers in the diaspora. He's basically not known at all inside Iran. He might be useful in the event, and I think it would be necessary, that a big section of the ruling class in Iran, the IRGC, which controls about a third of the economy, those guys would have to be brought along in some fashion to a new
Right.
formulation, a post-Islamic formulation. And I think the so-called crown prince, which the Israelis have invested far too much of their hopes there. But anyway, he may prove useful in bringing along, that crowd.
Hmm.
I think in the immediate term, I kind of regret that the Americans got involved.
Yeah.
I don't think that the bunker busters, the 12 or 14, 30,000-pound bombs, I don't think those were necessary, quite frankly. And I think the Trump has basically told the Israelis, you will accept this ceasefire. You will go no
All
further.
right.
You will
Yeah.
stop your bombing, which I think is a terrible price to pay. A terrible price to pay for essentially um, President Trump's ego,
Well, that's what
if I
it
can put
feels
it
like.
that
I
way.
mean, it seemed like the regime was wobbling. So Trump gets involved, launches these strikes, just declares them to be a success, although maybe there's some question about how successful it was, and then says that's it. And now seems fine, content to leave the regime in place, and as you say, has told the Israelis to stop. So where does that leave us?
Yeah, that's the big question. I do think it's regrettable. I mean, it is a pattern that we've seen from the Americans going back a long way. I do tend to beat up Trump quite a bit. But I think I was even more harsh, or at least as harsh, as far as Obama's concerned.
Yeah.
And this is part of the problem: is the Americans are almost incapable of having an honest conversation with themselves about foreign policy, because both the Democrats and the Republicans are implicated in some of the most ridiculously precipitous and reckless decisions that have produced the kind of order or disorder that we're seeing in the moment in the Middle East. This is what you get, right? If you become a slave to your own, a hostage to your own hubris, as was the case with Barack Obama, this is what you get. The emphasis on the JCPOA, the 2015 agreement, I guess it was 2015.
Yeah. 10 years
Uh,
ago.
yeah, which was a culmination. Yeah, it was actually 10 years ago next
Yeah.
month, of Obama's policy going back a couple of years, which was essentially, this was going to be Obama's big foreign policy legacy. I've got it all figured out.
Right.
And what we're going to do is we're going to have Iran and its networks as a kind of a balance to the Sunnis and the Arab states, which is just absolutely crazy. I mean, he lost everybody in his own administration on that policy. He lost he even lost Hillary Clinton on that, and Petraeus, and uh, Robert Hoff, and his Syrian envoys. But he thought he was smarter than anyone else. And at the end of the day, the only person he had in his corner was Ben Rhodes. Essentially, what happened was this. I'm getting a little bit too inside baseball. What happened was, long story short, the Iranians said, yes, we'll be happy to enter into a nuclear rapprochement with the United States. Um, so let's go. And they got pulled deeper and deeper into that process. And then, we swung in the Arab Spring revolutions. Obama participated only reluctantly in the NATO and largely French-led operation to protect the people of Libya while they were overthrowing Muammar Gaddafi. And then the Syrian uprising occurred. And the Syrian revolution was the most sort of democratic, pro-American of all of the Arab Spring uprisings. And so John Kerry gets pulled into the secret side level talks in Oman, or was it Bahrain? Anyway, where the Iranians said to him, look, you leave our guy in Damascus alone. Do not mess with Bashar Assad. Because if you mess with Bashar Assad, we're going to walk away from the table. And you guys are going to look like idiots. And so Kerry said, oh, okay, we won't bother him. And so Obama allowed Assad to cross the American red line on the use of chemical weapons. The Obama administration invited the Russians to police this preposterous agreement on chemical weapons, in which Assad essentially just moved from using sarin gas to chlorine gas and a crude form of napalm, and the he pulled the American garrison and the CIA out of Yemen, which allowed for the rise of the Houthis and the worst humanitarian disaster of that period in history. Starvation like crazy. It's awful. And wanting to disentangle himself from Iraq, he supported the Iran-backed candidacy of Nouri al-Maliki, really corrupt guy who integrated Iran's proxy forces into his own the official Iraqi defense system. The Iranians continued to pour more and more money into and arms into Hezbollah and Hamas. Hamas was emboldened. And then you have October 7th, 2023, and Netanyahu, this sort of sleepwalking into all of this, finally said enough and took out Hezbollah. The revolution in Syria, one of the happiest events, I should say, in the Middle East since the fall of the Ottoman Empire. People whine about al-Shura, the new guy, because he used to be Al Qaeda. Well, yeah, he used to be Jabhat al-Nusra. And Rob, you and I would have joined Jabhat al-Nusra if we were Syrians. I mean, come on. It was hell, population of 22 million, about 4 or 5 million end up being refugees, another 4 or 5 million are displaced, 500,000 killed, everybody driven mad. And you get all these Gulf states and oil gazillionaires who are funding these freelance jihadi outfits. So anyway, the Syrians have done extremely well. I'm very, very happy about what we've seen in Syria. It's still very dodgy, still very tentative, but the transitional government has given every appearance of wanting to be friendly with Israel. They actually were inviting Israeli businessmen to come and invest and tours of Damascus and so on. But it's still a very, very shaky proposition. But at least the Iranians have been driven out, and the Russians have been driven out. Iraq is still a bit of a mess, but Hezbollah is basically decapitated. Hamas is eviscerated. Bashar Assad is gone. So the universe is unfolding as it should. A lot more than this to make me cry.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, we can add to the list too, I guess, though, the Iranians supplying the Russians with drones and other weapons to use in Ukraine.
Drones, yeah.
And even just, the bottom line, the continued pursuit of a nuclear weapon, despite this deal 10 years ago that was supposed to prevent that. So instead of reining in the Iranians, it really unleashed and emboldened them.
Yeah, it totally emboldened them. They were completely, and Russia was emboldened as well.
Yeah.
Putin takes over Crimea and Donbass immediately after all that. And, nobody in the West really wanted to do anything. In Canada, our own government, Stéphane Dion, Trudeau's first foreign affairs minister, was even friendlier to the Russians than Trump is. He wanted to reestablish relationships with Russia. He wanted to invite Sergei Lavrov back into the Arctic Council. We'll use that as a way to rehabilitate the Kremlin. Wanted to reopen our embassy in Iran. I don't know what it is, but it takes quite a bit for the penny to drop.
Yeah.
Everybody wants stability, and everybody wants free trade, but you can't have stability in a structurally and inherently unstable torture state, because you never know the hour of the night. You never know the lash to the back of the slave that will cause him to turn on his master. And you can't have free trade with slave states.
No.
And so China has been the primary beneficiary of all of this. The Iranians have been selling enormous volumes of oil to China. The Russians have been the primary beneficiaries of this. And of course, the Khomeinists have been the beneficiaries of this. And it's all falling apart around our ears. It's all collapsing. And so right now, I mean, I really wish the Trump would have just said, go to hell. Or pardon me, but everybody have just told Trump to go to hell. We don't need your big bombs. We'll figure it out. We're slowly working our way, through the gargoyles. We whacked the head of the IRGC, we whacked the head of the Quds Force, we whacked the head of the Basij, we whacked the head of the aerospace program. We've rendered them almost defenseless by knocking out all of their batteries. Also, their offensive capabilities are almost gone. But we are stuck in this situation where we haven't done anything to prepare for regime change.
Right.
And Trump is uninterested in regime change. And he's got a lot of his own people barking at him, oh, forever wars. You shouldn't have done this, Marjorie Taylor Greene and, all these people are, Trump's leading us into another war in the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, you made the point in
So
your
it's
piece,
kind of
right?
crazy.
That you get the far left and the far right kind of converging here.
Exactly. You've got, and I mean, quite exactly and precisely, when you've got Tucker Carlson, bringing in all of these sort of code pink intellectuals onto this program. So, yeah, I mean, I think, the absurdities of shall we say, the American ruling class, I think, all their contradictions are coming to the fore. And it's a very, very difficult time. I mean,
Yeah.
me. I mean, all I care about is Marbar dictator. Like I'm not fond of Xi Jinping
Right.
or Vladimir Putin. I mean,
With the Ayatollah.
and those
Yeah.
guys and the Ayatollahs. So, I mean, finally, I think all of those structural flaws in the American policy, all of the contradictions, finally caused things to collapse. And you never know, how quickly these things can happen. Nobody predicted the end of the fall of the Berlin Wall. Nobody saw the Arab Spring coming. So I try to keep a bit of a spring in my step. I try to be hopeful. But it is hard work, and it is going to be a very hard slog in Iran. And it's a very, very precipitous moment now. Because, it's such an exciting possibility that, to give him credit, now has opened up a lot of this stuff. I wouldn't have thought for a moment after October 7th, I said, oh, Bibi's finished. He's finished. I mean, you had the largest demonstrations in the history of Israel, anti-government demonstrations. You had hundreds of thousands of people in the streets. Everybody wanted Bibi gone. And then the colossal intelligence failure behind October 7th.
Yeah.
But the guy is, he took out Nasrallah. He took out Hezbollah. He's defended Israel against the Houthi attacks. They've hit important facilities in Yemen. The Houthis aren't attacking shipping in the Red Sea like they were only a few months ago. And the Khomeinists are kind of, cowering in Tehran.
Yeah.
So, and Assad's gone. I mean, I'm not all that upset about the way things have been developing.
Yeah. Well, as you say, an interesting moment. We'll see where it all goes from here. Your analysis has mentioned therealstory.substack.com. Terry Glavin, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for the insight here. Appreciate it.
Great talking to you, Rob.